message that my connection network is unstable. So please tell me if at any point there's a problem.
Yes.
So yeah, we were talking about community radio being able to reach people at the very end of the development road. That is because uh, even All India Radio, if you look at it, has a reach of almost 98% or so. So there are areas which do not have electricity. There are areas where you do not have television, internet, absolutely no chance of being there, right? You might have a cell phone, of course, these days it is reaching everywhere, but it can reach, but radio can still be heard there, and it can be heard on mobile also. So it reaches people who cannot read and write. It reaches people who may not have access to electricity. The reception sets also are not so expensive, right? Also, it is very appropriate for cultures dominated by orality. We all have grown up on stories, right? Nana Nani, Dada Dadi ki kahaniyan and all of that. In our culture, we learn through word of mouth. And again, radio is a very effective medium as for cultures which are dominated by orality. Then you have lots and lots of people, especially in rural areas, owning radio. You will find them on their cycles when they go to their fields. You will find a radio lying in the kitchen of rural women. So it reaches out much more than other medium, and it is also easy to access. That's why we talk about community radio. So continuing on, little philosophically, little theoretically on why community radio is needed and how did it all start, right? So I'm sure all of you are familiar with the term media globalization. It basically means there is a lot of advancement of technology leading to media becoming very advanced and technologically very savvy. People are able to use it, right? And it has spread all across the world. So what has happened but is media globalization is there. Media is all across the world, but it is catering only to the commercial political interests, and therefore infringing the diversity of information, which basically means the media is expensive, the advancement of technology is there, but it is in the hands of very few people. Very few people can afford to set up media houses or newspapers, television, which is now run on very superior technology, right? So if very few people own it, only the information that they want to disseminate will come into the public domain. So it is infringing on the diversity of the information. People who don't have access will not be able to say their point of view unless a reporter goes and approaches them, right? And many reporters may not go to very far off places to approach people who are there, right? Then again, why is community radio needed? Although there is media globalization and not so much access to media, but having affordable access to media is a fundamental right of all, right? And therefore it is important that all governments make it possible, create circumstances where people are able to access media at an affordable price, right? Which means not just media consumption, also production. And also this is considered as an alternative media for revitalizing civil society. Now those are big words, but I'll explain it to them and it will become more clear as I go along. Alternative media basically means what we said earlier, that there is government media which is essentially used for talking from the point of view of the government, talking about schemes, talking about information that it wants to give to people. Then second is commercial, which is mainly for profit and entertainment. But what happens about rest of the information? So that is given by a medium which is alternative to these two media. It is not that it cannot entertain, but it will give you information from sources which are not possible in other kind of media. So alternative, and that helps more and more information which is essential for policy decisions, because that information is coming from people who may not be talked to, who are in at the grassroots. When it comes in the public sphere, in the public domain, then it revitalizes civil society. Revitalize simply means your decision is then based on more information, right? So it is a better decision. People who are civil society is the social sector. Social sector, when it gets community radio, it is able to involve more people. That is where it gets powerful also, right? So that is what we mean by this. Is a simple way of explaining alternative media and civil society. So let's quickly try to understand again the importance of community radio from three entry points, right? Some of it I have explained, but I'll just give you a small background. So we can understand it from 3 points, right? Globalization, which we just talked about, and I'll explain it in the Indian context. Then development, which again we just said it's a radio, which is a tool for development, and civil society and public sphere. When more information, more and diverse information is in the public domain, decisions are then more informed. So these are the three things we understand community radio from. So let's talk about India. So in India, what has happened? This is globalization from the point of view of globalization. So from the point of view of globalization, satellite revolution happened in the 1990s in India. There was also a boom in the information and communication technologies, right? At the same time, there was privatization also of media industries happening simultaneously. Earlier, all of this media was controlled by the government. Slowly, it was opening up. We call this era the LPG era. Now, many of the students here who are very young may not know LPG is also the name of of the cooking gas. But when we say LPG here, I mean liberalization, privatization, and globalization, right? So when LPG happens, then government tries to deregulate. Deregulate means have less control on media. It makes media more free, right? So that means private people can also own media, right? So now what happened when the sector was opened up? Many of us who don't have that huge amount of money cannot buy that media and start a media. It is only very big organizations, we call them giant media conglomerates. They are the ones who could get that equipment and start big media. So you have Times Group, you have India Today Group, you have CNN. So those are the big companies which grabbed all the media. So now what happened? Earlier, only government had control over media. Now it is government plus all these big corporate houses, right? So, but what happened was all these corporate houses were owning media as an industry, right? As a profit making venture. So now when that happens, they don't give you programs which will be, only information, right? You will get bored. So you'll switch off the TV. They will give you what people like. So they will give you a lot of entertainment. So what has happened now is if you look at 800 channels that are available today, if you just browse them, many of the news channels will look alike. Many of the entertainment channels will be almost giving you the same amount, same kind of thing. Sports channels will be giving you same kind of thing. So you might have 800 channels, but the kind of programming you get in those channels will almost be similar, and it is all directed at TRPs, right? So therefore, there is a need because of media globalization. The response to media globalization is alternative media had to come in order for diversity to be there in media content. And also, of course, as I said earlier, when media is not being used on one side by propaganda or publicizing government schemes, on the other for commerce, what happens to media for development, right? That potential of media was not being used. So for that purpose, alternative media came as a response to media globalization. So I hope you're with me, because now I move from that globalization to the whole idea about how do you understand community radio from the point of view of development. Now, what happened in India again, like other many other countries after the World War II, uh, India got its independence, and all the other nations also in the world who got independence. They started an exercise of what is called modernization, development, nation building, and so on. Right? That was the effort. At that time, media was actually used for dissemination of information. We call it diffusion of innovation. We used to think if we give lot of information and gyan, to people, they will become modern, right? So they were trying to say that mass media can be used to educate people, inform them, right? So if we inform people, they will get developed. This is a very dominant paradigm of development. It is very top down. Give them lot of information, tell them that they have to become modern, and they will become modern. It did work in some, it was important at that time to give information to people, but it worked for a very short time. After people, adapted some of these innovations or new ways of life, slowly, they realize it doesn't go with their culture, and so they will give up, right? So this top down kind of development paradigm did not work all the time, because it was very prescriptive. They were telling you all the time, aisa karo, you do like this, you do like that, and very very pedagogical means all the time giving you instructions on how you should become better. And so it works for some time, but after that, if people cannot identify with what you are saying, people stop participating. So that is where there was a shift in this dominant paradigm to what is called participatory communication. Here they say you have to take people or the stakeholders who are the actual people who can bring about development along with you. They must participate with you in the media. So this participation is not just about getting feedback. It is I mean, to go with your terminology, DIY, do it yourself kind of approach in community radio. So if, for example, you want to give them messages about health, they will listen, but they may not follow. You tell them eat palak or spinach, all, and they will listen, they may not follow. But if they were to make a program on that from their side, understand that eating greens is useful, or they can bring their own knowledge about greens also in that program, because they may be knowing better than us. So when they make programs like that, automatically, in within they'll also follow it probably. And when people hear voices or radio program from people of their own community, they might listen and follow better, right? So this is how community radio wanted to change the paradigm by bringing people into the fold of development, right? So they should participate in this whole process of development, not just be targets of development. So what does participatory approach do in development? It is people centric, it is local, it builds on local knowledge, it is always specific to a location, just like the community radio. It focuses on empowerment, people also sharing their knowledge. It is not giving knowledge, it is sharing knowledge. It is about making people self reliant, in charge of their own development. And it is non linear communication. And for this kind of, anybody doing research on community radio also must do participatory research. Therefore, they should not just go and start taking data. People have to be involved in the process. So when all this happens, then you have more and more people involved in receiving as well as giving information, right? And then is that is the time that civil society or the social sector, which is outside of the corporate sector and the government sector, becomes more vibrant, right? So let me bring it all together and tell you what exactly is the purpose of community radio. How do we identify community media or community radio? It is a medium which is in the community, for the community, about the community, and by the community, right? It provides right of access to minority and marginalized groups, people who don't have access to big media. It protects and promotes cultural and linguistic diversity. So in community radio, you can make programs in your own language. You don't have to go and audition, right? or speak very formal kind of English or Hindi or your own language. You can just talk in your own language, in your own dialect, and nobody is going to tell you that this is not, it's conversational kind of programming that is made there. Then it serves a recognizable community. So it is very culture specific. So community radio reaches, let us say, 15-kilometer radius. Now within that, it becomes your tool to have a discussion about your needs. But the discussion is not always just dominated by experts. Like, if it is a campus radio, it is the students who are the community. So the students are the ones whose voices will be heard on that radio. Students are the one who will raise questions. Students will be the one who will also bring in information. It is not just like a classroom where these days classrooms also have become very interactive, right? So you have to always know what your teacher knows, and then also share your knowledge or ask questions, right? So here through community radio, people, ordinary people, aam admi as they say, or aam aurat bhi, they all have the provision to ask questions from the powers, people who are in power. Now how can that happen? It is not as if today, you tell me, okay, I have this radio station, you can come and speak, and people will start speaking. No, all this while you never wanted them to come and talk, you just wanted them to listen, and now you want that they should come and start talking on radio. No. So it is that you have to train them, give chance. Like many of you are panelists here, you will tomorrow, get trained into how public speaking is done, right? Similarly, there also training of ordinary people has to be done more, and so that more and more people can participate. Now, always the programming is motivated by community well-being, and not by, this is what people will like, they will give me more ads. No, that is not the motivation behind community radio. And it is always accountable to community members. So it is managed by them, it is socially owned by them, and they can always question that this community radio is doing good work or not. It has to be editorially independent of government, commercial, religious institutions, and political parties. So community radio policy does not allow but a very partisan kind of programming to be broadcast on community radio. So when did community radio come to India? That is, it all started, this whole struggle. Today we are talking about community radio, but the struggle is like, it started way back in 1995. And it started with the Supreme Court. This is a landmark Supreme Court judgment where Justice Sawant said airwaves are public property and must be utilized for advancing public good. Now, I will not go into detail of this. I will just tell you that what it led to. It led to the campaign for community radio in India, right? So see, the campaign went on like this. Uh, so first the Supreme Court judgment came, and then there was what is called the Bangalore Declaration. Why? Because when this judgment came, immediately decision was taken to privatize the broadcasting in India. But privatization doesn't mean it is coming to people who do not have money to buy to auction, for the, when they will auction for the frequencies, they may not have money to buy those frequencies, because frequencies are very expensive. 2G, 3G, 4G, you know how much they cost, and then even the airwaves cost a lot. So getting a slot in the frequency is big money. So Bangalore Declaration said that now you have opened up the sector for commercial purposes, please open it up also for the social sector, right? So this, nothing happened till 2000. And so in July 2000, again, there was a meeting of all the stakeholders, civil society groups, and where even South Asia, people from South Asia participated, Bangladesh, Maldives, Sri Lanka, so Nepal, they all participated. AMAC, Asia Pacific, also played a big role. This AMAC, you remember, World Association of Community Radio Broadcasters, the Asia Pacific chapter, they also played a role. All of these people came together and reiterated that airwaves should be, the opening of the airwaves should be taken to its logical conclusion, and it should be given to the social sector. So what happened? In 2003, government did open up the sector, but it was only the campus radio, campus, let's say educational institution. It was called community radio only, but it was actually something like a campus radio. So I'm putting it as campus radio guidelines. It was called community radio guidelines. So this was for only recognized educational institutions to be able to apply. They were slow and cautious in opening up the airwaves. Suddenly you open up and so many radio stations come up, because people were thinking almost 4,000 radio stations can come up in India, right? So 2003, they opened it for educational institutions. Then people were arguing, this is good. You've opened it up for non-profit sector. But then again, campuses, people are educated, they already have access to other kind of media, they can express themselves through writing. What about people in the rural areas? What about poor people? What about people who are who are in remote areas of the country? How will they get access to the airwaves? Then finally, when the lobbying and activism, advocacy kept happening, in November 2006, Government of India opened the sector and announced an expanded community radio policy where NGOs, non-governmental organizations, could apply for community radio. So you must be thinking from 95 to 2000 to 2006, nothing was happening. No, no, a lot of advocacy. That campaign was happening, and to help that campaign, there are these four radio stations which were there, right? From 98 onwards, these stations, now these are not licensed stations. These are non-governmental organizations setting up radio stations, but making programs like a community radio will make, not able to broadcast them. So what will they do? They were narrowcasting. You cannot broadcast in India without a license. And license without a policy is not possible, right? Now, policy came in 2006, but all this while, from 98 onwards till I did my work. I started my work in 2000. Soon, close to when the Passaport Declaration came about. So these are the four cases which I studied. So these were stations which were working like community radio but narrowcasting. Now, Deccan Development Society Radio, what was it doing? It was playing programs on cassette players. They would go to different villages and play those programs in cassette players, and then they would record programs from the villages also. Audiences will become their talent. So similarly, Alternative for India Development and Kutch Mahila Vikas Sangathan, these two, they bought slots. They had to buy slots on All India Radio, local radio stations, right? And they would make half an hour program in a week, and then they would broadcast it through that radio station. They got permission for that. But there were problems with that, of course. It required money, and also, in between all the programming that was happened, just one community radio program, many people will listen, others may not listen, right? Although in Kutch, the program by Kutch Mahila Vikas Sangathan actually won an award also, and it was the only Kutchi program on All India Radio. Kutchi is a language which doesn't have a script, right? So All India Radio did not have Kutchi programs till they gave their program to All India Radio, but they had to pay to buy a slot. And then in Budikote, what they did was, by that time cable TV had come, so they started using cable to to cable cast the radio programs on. People could receive it on their television sets, only the sound, that is. So when these experiments helped the advocates of community radio to tell the government about the uses of community radio, and the government got convinced, and by November 2006 we have what is called the community radio policy in India. Now, as part of the community radio policy, educational institutions, agricultural institutions, agriculture universities, Krishi Vigyan Kendras, and non-governmental organizations which have a minimum of 3 years of experience of working with community radio can apply for a license. Now, why 3 years of experience is required? Because see, community radio is not like, it is not the solution to everything that you parachute into a village, set up community radio and development will happen. No. It is that you're already doing participatory development work with communities, and then you also use this community radio to better your work of engagement with the communities. So it will help you to bring people into the different initiatives that for development that you are, it will make people participate in those initiatives. So what if Prestige University wants to set up a radio station, they can, and what you will get is a 50-watt transmitter, right, and an ERP of 100 watts, and then it'll you can broadcast it within a area, as I said earlier, of about 15 to 20 kilometers radius. But the only problem right now is that you cannot broadcast news on radio. Now, I'm sure a lot of you must be surprised when we have so many private television channels which can broadcast news. Why not community radio? No, even your commercial radio cannot broadcast news. Now, you must be saying there is so much information. How are you saying no news? No, the policy of community radio says no news or current affair programs or any program of political nature. It cannot be broadcast. You can only broadcast all India, rebroadcast all India radio news, which already has 99% penetration. So they are able to reach out to people anyhow. Though that news you can rebroadcast, but you cannot make local news and broadcast. This is only there in India. In any other country, if you have a community radio license, the policy actually says you have to broadcast. For some reason in India, there are reasons that government has given why news is not allowed either on commercial radio or on community radio. Now, there is lobbying going on for it to be allowed, and maybe in very soon we will hear that it'll be permitted. So yeah, that's how the policy works. So just to link it to the idea of giving uh, amplifying the voice of the of people. I think so far you've got some idea, but see what community radio usually works with, and see it when we say it is all development, it doesn't mean it's all boring programming. The programming can be very, very interesting, right? You will have folk songs. If you listen to some of the I don't have the provision here where I can play and that you will be able to listen, but otherwise I have slide where I play the signature tune of some of the radio stations. They are so good. You will The music is wonderful. It really becomes what can be called a cultural mechanism of sorts, right? Where the local or the vernacular creativity of people, the people creativity of the local people. This is a concept by Jean Burgess. Calls it vernacular creativity. The local talent is what gets showcased in community radio. So there is a lot of stories, folk tales, which are now vanishing. You will get to listen to them on community radio. Folk songs that you have not heard before, you'll and in the local language. In Kutch, there is a kind of music called Vai singing. Now that is almost disappearing. You will find that community radio has revived it. Some old crops, some dying sports, some formats which we have totally forgotten. We only like, there's DJ and we call it, there's RJ, radio jockey, right? So RJs, and they'll only speak in one way. No, that's not one only kind of programming on radio. You have radio drama formats. You'll have long programs where two women are sitting and just discussing about their life and the problems they face and how those problems can be solved, and other women are listening in because those are women from their community only. So that kind of very local grounded kind of programming happens, and people who are ordinary people, like who are not really artists or acclaimed artists or experts, they are the ones who get to be heard on radio. Plus you of course discuss all the scheme. There are also programs which will discuss schemes of the government, but see if it is you know giving you some advantage or not, or are there issues. So those can also be discussed. You don't just get information, you also discuss and have a perspective. When I interviewed somebody, they said it gives us a drishtikon, which is a perspective on issues. So that's how community radio works. So if you think that you have not heard of community radio before, and does it exist or not, or is it just a phantom that madam is talking about? No, community radio actually exists, and in South India has almost now 300 community radio stations. Not sure if you know about some of them. Bangladesh, small country next to us, has 18 community radio stations. Nepal has, again, small country, but has 300 radio stations. So you must be wondering why so less in India, right? That's the question we keep asking also, right? That why not 4,000, but why? So that is something I can't answer. That is what the government will answer, right? So I'm sure we will have many, many more, because the government is trying to promote the community radio sector. And the current plan is to have a community radio station, at least one in every district. So we earlier had 640 districts, now we have 739 districts. So the time is not far when you will have at least 739 community radio stations in India, right? So before I go to a little bit about COVID, I'd just like to read this one sentence, one quote from Bell Hooks, which talks about eliminating what is called voice poverty. So till now we have been talking, about people not having a voice, getting a voice on the community radio. So what actually happens is people, we call this voice poverty, when people cannot express themselves on a media platform, right? They don't have that opportunity. But it's not as if you give people, as I said earlier, give people an opportunity, they can just come and start speaking. They need to be they need to feel confident that you will actually be listening to what they are saying. What they say matters. You will give it importance, and you will just not say, "Arey, she is just saying something and going." So it is not voice poverty. Addressing voice poverty doesn't just mean giving people a platform where they can speak, but it has to be effective. Effective in the sense they should be able to. They should get that confidence to come and speak. They should be able to speak their mind, and then they should feel that whatever they are saying will be heard. So listening is a very important part in community radio, and that will bring down the poverty of voice that we have today in many parts of our country. So, and Bell Hooks says that moving from silence to speech is for the oppressed, the colonized, the exploited, and those who stand and struggle side by side, a gesture of defiance that heals. To be able to say your thing is what heals. That makes life and new growth possible. Right? It is that act of speech or talking back that is no mere gesture of empty words. That is the expression of our movement from object to subject, not just a target of what other people are saying, but to be a participant in the process of communication. That is the liberated voice, right? So, yeah, I could stop here, but I have a little bit of information on very small, just I'll take 3-4 minutes on how community radio contributed during COVID-19. Do you want me to talk about that, or do you want me to stop here if my time is over?
No, no, ma'am, you can surely continue.
All right. Harsh, permission granted?
Yes, ma'am. It's all
Okay.
yours, ma'am. It's all yours. Continue, ma'am.
Yeah, I'll just take 2-3 minutes more and just give you an idea about community radio, how it was the source of information for all. Information for all is a UNESCO program also, which talks about information being accessible to everybody. In digital world these days, we talk about digital divide, where people are not able to not all people are able to have access to digital media, right? Although now it is reaching to quite a lot of people, right? So what community radios did was they became the site of information for all during COVID-19. And this was especially important because there was a lot of information available on websites. There was a lot of information in media. There was a lot of information also on websites and on social media, let's say, right? All kinds of information was flowing. But how about the interpretation of that information? I'm sure during COVID-19, you have picked up a lot of words like quarantine, isolation, social distancing, wearing a mask, and then vaccine. So many words have become our daily use words during COVID-19. But how is it interpreted in the language of the people? So I was part of one of the dialogues with South Asian community radio stations, and in that they said, for example, the word quarantine. hmm, So quarantine was being interpreted as if it is they are talking about jail, right? So sanitizer. How do people come to know what is a sanitizer? And there are so many local things which can be used as sanitizer. So all that interpretation of the information which was in coming from different authentic sources was actually being interpreted for the people by community radio. And these are not very well funded stations, right? Uh, they were facing challenges. They couldn't come to their radio stations, but they were doing, many community radio reporters were working from home and trying to reach out and make programs, send them by WhatsApp to their station, which could broadcast. So a lot of contribution has been made by the community radio sector in interpreting and giving information to all during COVID-19. People could call back on to the radio station and ask for information also. If they not just gave information, they also participated in community activities, right? And because they have good links with community. So if there were people who were losing their livelihoods, or if there were places where food had to be sent, community radio people were actually the ones who helped in that kind of activity. Then they were very active with debunking fake news or misinformation. So much fake information. We call it infodemic during pandemic, right? Infodemic is too much wrong information, which was prevalent during, it is still during COVID-19. COVID-19 is not over yet. Hope it will be over soon. So what they were trying to do is they were trying to tell people not to become victims of rumors. So there was a rumor, for example, that all the dead bodies of corona infected people were being thrown in the sea and we should stop eating seafood. Then they were saying that mosquito bite is what can also lead to corona, you getting infected with corona. Then they were all kinds of rumors. I'm sure you have heard a lot of them. And WhatsApp University gives you all those rumors. It passes on so fast, right? So they were trying to get authentic information and trying to tell people not to believe such stories. So they played a big role in doing that. And again, it was being done in local language. So they played a major role because in local language, sometimes the information is given, it is not even available on your fact check sites. Bhavna will tell you that fact check sites are not always, in local language. So sometimes they're not able to check facts. So the community radio station reporters were checking the facts and telling people what is right and what is wrong. They were having schools for students who did not have access to internet, right? A lot of the women, girls, have had to leave school because they don't have access to mobile phones or laptops where they can get their classes. So many community radio stations were actually conducting classes which they could receive on radio sets, right? And they were doing a lot of counseling where people were going into depression, people who were victims of domestic violence, people who had lost jobs. They were able to do a lot of counseling for those people also. So I'll stop with that. Thank you so much for giving me so much time to say all that I wanted to say. I hope it was helpful and I'm happy to take questions now.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you,
you.
ma'am. It turned out to be really helpful. I believe we all now possess a much better understanding of community radio. And the best thing that I loved about this that the questions that we covered, you already covered all of them, like most of them, the important questions that we were about to
Too
put
much
up.
information.
It was really useful, ma'am. So yeah, you saved us time. Okay. So now I would like the panelists to take over the session.
As ma'am, you have already covered my first question, that is of COVID-19 and misinformation regarding that. So now I would like to ask ma'am, as you have seen that in today's generation, all are busy in their phones and televisions. So as earlier, the radio is playing very important role, and I think in this period, the radio is playing important role as earlier they are playing or not?
Very,
What?
very good question, Muskan. A lot of people think that now radio listening has gone down, right? So that is the reason community radio is so important. See, what is important is if you have an event in your school, in your college, right, and that gets recorded, will you go and watch it again or not to see your picture, right?
Yes.
So in community radio, you get people to make the programs. So if, for example, in small place, a set of people, let's say students in that community, go and make programs, they will go and tell their parents, okay, please listen to the program today. My voice is coming on radio, right? So the more you involve people in making programs, the more people will listen to community radio. So community radio is not so much about reception; it is about participation, right? So what happens it is not so much about radio making. They say it is 1% about radio, 99% about community. So when people will make programs on their issues relevant to them, things that they would like discussion to happen, they will automatically tune into community radio. So get more people to participate. If you have your own radio at Prestige University, and if you get biology students to come and make a program, they will all start listening to programs made by communication students also, right? So this is how it works. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. Yes, Isha.
So, ma'am, my question is that since most of the community radios are located in the rural regions of the country, and these regions are deprived of basic amenities like water and electricity supply. So, if we talk about the accessibility of infrastructure, what difficulties do they face in setting of radio community?
Again, very good questions. You've prepared very good questions, really. See, first of all, I think your question is that if they don't have basic amenities, why will they have money for radio, right?
Yes.
In fact, once we had gone to Jharkhand and we were interviewing people about the use of community radio, and one person said, "Roti to hai nahi, community radio kya karenge?" Huh? So this is one way of looking at it. Of course, the basic amenities are most important. Only when people have basic amenities will they be able to think of also coming and making radio, right? A lot of these places will have people who are wage earners, so they can't spend a day on community radio, they will lose their wages, right? So we understand that those issues are there, but that is precisely why you need radio. Because see, if you do not have the basic amenities, who knows that you don't have? How will you tell the government that you don't have basic amenities? This is a platform where you can speak up that even today, after so many years of independence, I stay in a place where I don't have electricity. I don't get water to drink. Potable water is not there. So these are the places where you can both discuss those issues and then also collectively try to reach some solution. A lot of women who actually never moved out of their houses have now started talking to their BDOs, block development officers. Because of the confidence they have gained on radio, they go to the block development officer and actually question them that why are the schemes not reaching us? Why are the basic amenities not reaching us? Yeah,
Even I have a question, ma'am.
sure.
During my research, I found that most of the community radios, I mean, whether I talk about the Lalit Lokwani or the community radio, Radio Dharkan or Radio Bundelkhand, so they say yes. I mean, there is. I mean, they were struggling with the financial
Yeah.
crisis, and the second was the technical thing. So, like if I talk about the Radio Bundelkhand, there is already a private competitor. I think either a Big FM is there. So even now the private FM stations are reaching in C and D category cities, or to the remote areas. So there is a big competition for community radios, and the financial crisis is already there. I mean, those who are just dedicating their whole time, I mean, how they are going to, I mean, what would be their, how we are going to pay to them. And electricity issue was also there. And then the this transmitter thing. I mean, on the one hand, I mean, signal were clear, but on the second hand, because I mean, it is terrestrial waves and all those things, so clarity was not there. So such kind of challenges were being faced by those community runners. So how that?
So that's like 3 questions. You put them in one. So let me start with the first thing. I think the first thing you were talking about was sustainability, right?
Yes.
So financial sustainability is no doubt an issue. Okay. But for us and for the community radio stations also, the important thing, financial sustainability is very important, and I'll come to that. But like you also mentioned, technical sustainability, whether they're able to maintain their equipment or not, because money is required for that also. Then are they able to, procure new equipment every time technology changes or not? So all those issues are there. But again, for the community radio people, the most important issue is social sustainability. And that is probably the answer to the other two sustainabilities also. Social sustainability means if the community thinks that this is our radio, if they are involved, and if it is bringing them the changes and the benefits that a community radio can bring about, and they participate in that, automatically they will find ways of generating funds in order to support community radio, right? I can give a very interesting example which is very different. I mean, some people might understand what I'm trying to say, but how does a temple or any place of worship or gurdwara or a masjid or any other your churches, how do they survive? Do they have income? Not always. No, it is always because people are involved and that they will see that this doesn't close down. So if you become that much a part of the community, that people feel, oh, this is our radio, people will see that it is sustained. There is crowdfunding that can be done. Oh, and also see, an NGO is running it, it can get projects, right? Government is supporting community radio a lot. A lot of the ministries are now giving programming to community radio, so that can be done. Only thing is their programming on all India radio will be more information based, whereas this will be more discussion based. So they will make it like community radio. It will be even good for the ministry to get such programming, right? So there are ways around this, but for that, the key word is genuine participation of the people. So did I miss out on any of your questions? Yeah.
Much, ma'am. Yes. One more question. Actually, you were just saying, like, I mean, if we say or we, if we observe, I mean, most of the community radios here in India are basically the campus radios. So why they are called the community radios when there is no community participation? I mean, that should be segregated. I mean, rather than saying that we are having like 280 community radios, we should say we are having this number of campus radios and this number of community radios. So why, I mean, the real participation of the people when we talk, when we say that, yes, community radios can empower people or, can enhance the voice of voiceless. So what is the reason? I mean, why the government is not uh, coming forward for it?
Okay. No. Government has got during COVID-19, the importance of community radio has been established. Our MIB ministry has taken note that community radio should now be encouraged. So it is happening. That's why I said very soon you might have almost 700 plus community radio stations. So it has taken time, but gradually, and there needs to be policy reform, of course, so that community radio is able to broadcast news and is able to do all the kind of things that it is capable of doing. So government is giving support, so much so that there is 70% funding support also from the government if you want to set up your community radio station. Of course, the bureaucracy is there, which is where government needs to come in and make things simpler. Right. As far as community and campus radio is concerned, this is a debate which is there world over. Right. Many countries will have separate campus and community radio policy. Right? Others will have same community radio policy where campus radios are there also. So it is not as if campus radio stations are different or they need to be outside of community radio policy. They can also do community radio work. So what I'm trying to say here is, like someone here was saying, I think either Isha or Muskan had asked, that it is mostly found in rural areas. No, community radio is also for the urban poor people. So there are stations which are very much in the city also. Of course, more are found in remote areas and rural areas. You are absolutely right. But then they are supposed to be working even for people who are marginalized in the cities. Right? For example, Gurgaon Ki Awaaz is a station which is in Gurgaon. Now, is Gurgaon remote by any standards? No. But what is it working with? Who is it working with? It is working with migrant workers. Right? It is working with the small villages which are around Gurgaon, right? From where your daily help comes, right? There are small villages in Gurgaon, which is a city, which is also now an IT hub. You'll have very rich people, but you know how their household runs. It runs on house help, which comes from these small areas. So they cater to the urban poor, the marginalized within the urban areas. Now, another thing, in rural areas also, not everybody is marginalized. If you have a radio in rural areas, and again we say local culture, but in local culture, the sarpanch is the most powerful, and he is the only one who gets to speak. The she sarpanch is also, sometimes he is speaking, the husband is speaking. So that local culture is not to be reflected. Even within rural areas, it is the marginalized people who should be getting a voice. So we have to be clear about the principles on which community radio works in order for it to be effective. And government is now talking about, I think our minister Javadekar ji had talked of community radio as the tools for social change or tools for development during COVID-19. This whole concept of vocal for local, it goes so well with community radio.
Right. There are questions from participant side also. There is a question from Ms. Ranu Tomar, and she is asking that does right wing or regressive politics have any impact on community radio in India? Is there any kind of censorship to curb right to decent?
Okay. Hi, Ranu. Good to get a question from you. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I could do a very simple answer to that by saying, as of now, broadcasting which is political in nature is not allowed. Also, there is a lot of care being taken, not that community radio doesn't get into the hands of political outfits, right? Especially religious outfits, right? But again, the essence of community radio is freedom of speech, right? So everybody gets to say what they want to say, but the law of the land applies. So there is a code of All India Radio Code or code of broadcasting, which everybody has to follow again, right? So all of this put together kind of ensures that you have, less biased or one-sided kind of programming on radio, and there are checks and balances in place. So from within the community and from the outside, where this kind of programming, extreme kind of programming like hate speech and all is certainly not allowed on community radio. What was the second question? Censorship. But like you are saying, there is more a tendency towards what is called self-regulation, not self-censorship. Self-regulation among community radio stations. They usually, because they are there for, the people who are involved in community radio stations are ordinary people. So they can't be fighting cases in courts. So usually you will find that people are cautious about what they're saying. And as far as indecent language and all of this is concerned, censorship from outside is not what is encouraged. What is encouraged usually is that there is a community audit. So if there is going to be things that community has objections to, they can always come and talk to the people on in community radios. So I hope that kind of answers the question that you were asking.
Another question, ma'am, is from Akanksha Arora. She is also one of the participants, and she is asking the question from the historical perspective that when we say, I mean, community radio here in India, so like date goes back in 1995, and the initiative was taken in 2004. What about other foreign countries when the community radio have been started in other countries?
I don't want to promote my book, but for that I'll have to, go to one full chapter on the history of community radio in India, policy in India, and worldwide also. So community radio started way back in 1940s, in Bolivia. So they were the miners radio of Bolivia. So South America is where it all came from, and history of community radio, beginning of community radio is different in different countries. For example, in Bangladesh, the policy came out in 2008, 2 years after our expanded policy, right? In Nepal, they still don't have a policy, believe it or not. They have more radios than us, but they don't have a community radio policy. All right. Sri Lanka, for example, doesn't have a policy as of now. Maldives is working on a policy. Bhutan is trying to come up with a policy, right? So in if you look at UK, they earlier had access radio, and then they started calling it community radio. Right? Nepal, Canada, Ireland, Australia have a long history of community radio stations. A lot of African countries, for example, you will find, for example, especially South Africa, if you look at it, has a very progressive policy which came in the 90s. US has what is called the low power FM policy, right? So every country, every region has a different history, but it all started way back in 1940. And you link community radio also with what are called new social movements. Right? So at the time when social movements started in the 60s and 70s, the talk about independent, platforms which are democratic was, it was the beginning of those democratic platforms where civil society, again, social sector became active. Yeah.
From
Ma'am,
Yes, Muskan.
ma'am, as you are talking about participation, so ma'am, in today's time, or we have seen that most of the females are want to participate in this radio session or radio work, but because of the gender inequality, they are not able to do so. So, what are you thinking about this?
Muskan, very good question, really. And these days I work more on women in community communication, right? So again, that needs a lot of time to talk about, but the main point that you are saying is absolutely right. Whenever you have any meeting in a village, for example, right, or otherwise also, when we were talking about addressing the voice poverty, this is what we want to say. Women are the marginalized within any group, right? And they never seldom get to talk. And participation doesn't mean that if you're having a meeting, have 5 women included, that today we have invited women, and they will sit at the back and they will have their veil on their face and they will not speak. They will only say yes, yes, yes. So that is not what is participation. Participation is that they should be able to speak up their mind and that you will listen. So that so community radio, uh, it is not just, as I said, community radio is not the only solution. Through community work, through engaging with women, through bringing about social change, we have to empower women to be able to come out and speak, right? So it is only when you give them opportunity to speak, when you train them to speak, suddenly it doesn't today if I ask, go to a village, and take a mic and say, okay, you can speak whatever you want to speak, here is a mic, and I give it to a woman, will she speak? First of all, if there are men standing around, she will not speak. If her jate or her husband's elder brother is saying, she will not even bring up her ghungar, right? So you have to create enabling conditions where women can come and feel confident to speak. But the good thing is that women are coming out. So this Sangam radio I talked about, Rudino radio I talked about, it is an all women community radio station. You try to talk to those women and you will not say women can't talk, right? They have become so confident and they talk. And there, even women are not just brought as if they are going to come up with issues. They also have solutions, right? So simple programs about their lives, that is what you can start with, right? Go and talk to them, uh, tell them that whatever you say is all right, so like that. So this is how it usually happens. I want to tell you a story. I went for doing a focus group discussion in Jharkhand, and we were trying to interview a lot, women, group of women. So they were totally quiet. They won't speak, and they were smiling and smirking at me, and I was seeing that all the men are standing there and looking at them. We had got them together as a group. So then I had my senior professor with me and another research assistant who were male. So I just told, we looked at them and they realized that these women are uncomfortable. What they did was they took all the men chatting and they took them out of that room. And when women, you should have seen how the scenario changed. All the women put up their, veils and ghungat utha liya, and then you could not stop them from talking. So you have to create conditions where women. So first, women should be able to come together, talk to themselves, gain confidence, and then participate in the large, what we call the dominant public sphere. Right. So you have to train Muskan, you have to train Isha. See, Isha and Muskan can talk. So why can't other women talk also? Okay.
Thank you.
You have to build their capabilities to talk, right?
It was such a nice session, ma'am. I mean, wonderful, very enlightening, very engaging, in fact. And so many information we, in fact, got. And in chat box also, participants are writing that very informative session it was. And on behalf of Prestige Institute of Management and Research, Indore, BAJMC Electronic Media Department, I, Bhavna Pathak, want to thank you, ma'am, for providing your valuable time to us and discussing with us in Media Monitor on such a relevant topic that if we really want that in today's era, when we say information is the power, and that information has to be reached to the remote areas as well, so they too have to become powerful, and community media could be one of the best way to make them informed, make them informed citizens, so that they can participate in a democratic nation, so in their way. So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
My pleasure to be here, and thank you for the wonderful questions. Thank you,
Thank
Harsh,
you, ma'am.
also
Thank you, ma'am.
for giving me all the time.
Thank you, ma'am. We had a great
Thank
time
you.
interacting with you.
Ma'am.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you so much, ma'am.
Thanks to all participants also. Thanks to Isha, Harsh, Muskan, Professor Zubair sir, all of you. Thanks a lot for being with
Thank
us.
you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.